Joining us now is a guy you may know. Mike Baker was a CIA covert guy for about 16 years. And he now hosts the President's Daily Brief, which is a podcast well worth your time. And he knows the turf over there. Am I missing anything here, Mr. Baker? Should I be emphasizing some fact in the theater that I'm missing?
No, I mean, I think you hit the key points. One is using the word murky when we're talking about the potential for negotiations or discussions. Right? I mean, this is a textbook example of mixed messaging, right? Both from the U.S., from Iran, and also from potential mediators. The Pakistanis have been very aggressive in trying to position themselves as the mediators for this. And they're all saying different things. President Trump, in the course of one Truth Social post, said that, we're having talks, productive, deal close, and then in the same post, but if you don't, we're coming after you. We're going to obliterate you. And so the Iranians are saying there's no talks going on. And, the mediators are saying, well, we're very hopeful about potential peace negotiations. So it's no wonder that the population is incredibly confused. As far as the operational side of this, I think you hit the high points here, which is that, look, they are not talking about a long-term occupation. We went into Iraq in 2003 with over 150,000 troops, to engage in that conflict. We knew we were talking about a long-term operation. We've got 2 Marine Expeditionary Units. We've got some elements of the 82nd Airborne out deployed now in theater for the Iran conflict. So at the likely scenario, if there's not some miracle of negotiations, is that those elements will likely be used, as you pointed out, for these quick, specific, targeted missions. Possibly seizing and destroying infrastructure on a handful of the islands that the Iranians use to help control the strait. I don't think we're talking about any sort of long-term occupation of Card Island. That would be a real problem. And politically, I think the White House certainly is smart enough to understand that nobody is in the mood for a long-term occupation here.
What it looks to me like is the Iranians, whoever they may be in charge, I don't even know if there is anybody in charge, want to wear us down economically and believe that the U.S. press, which is true, is against the action, and then that will drive public opinion about President Trump down and maybe ignite inflation here. And then worldwide, we already saw Europe not supporting the action at all. And then Iran's hoping that China and Russia will come in on their side. So it's a waiting game for them. The longer this lasts, the better it is for Iran, correct?
Yes. And I think the one part of this that was clear at the beginning of this conflict was that it would come down to the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian regime has used that before as a weapon. They've always threatened it as a weapon. And so it was clear that they have no other leverage really to speak of in terms of influencing the international community. So, of course, it was always going to come down to them creating the chaos and attempting to blockade and affect the strait and doing what is now currently happening, right? Paying a lot more at the pump as far as the voters in the U.S. and in the EU are concerned. So, yeah, that was a given. The Russians and Chinese, you know what, they are helping. I think there's almost no possibility that they're not providing targeting data in terms of satellite imagery, assistance on the intelligence side in terms of movement of U.S. personnel and assets. The Iranians have had a quick series of strikes at the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi, and targeted and destroyed some aircraft, injured a dozen U.S. service members. And that ability was enabled, almost, I would put my salary on it, by either Chinese or Russian or both assistance in terms of that targeting to make their strikes more lethal.
But they don't have many weapons left, I understand, in Iran. I mean, we've downgraded them to the sense that their ordnance is very low. Is that true?
Well, yes, we've degraded their military capabilities significantly. Their stockpiles of missiles, their launchers. And look, that was, from the Israeli perspective, the missile program was more of a threat in the short and midterm than the nuclear program. So from an operational metric, if you look and say, are we winning this thing? Can we declare victory? Well, yes, from an operational perspective, we can, because we have had significant success in degrading their abilities and also their manufacturing facilities for these munitions. So from that metric, yes. From the metric of it, if you went into this and said, well, we want a better government in Iran for the betterment of the Iranian people and peace and stability in the region, which frankly all the regional actors, the Saudis and others would like to see, then that's a little bit mixed. That's not quite the victory.
Yeah, we haven't seen that. Do you believe that the Iranians are close to enriching enough uranium to build a bomb? Do you believe that?
Yeah, I believe, look, once you're at 60%, and by all accounts, by a lot of different measures, they were stockpiling 60% enriched uranium. There is no civilian or peaceful need for anything really above 5%.
So if that's true, and Lindsey Graham on my podcast absolutely walked us through that, why wouldn't Europe then be on our side saying we just can't afford to have a theocracy that hates infidels be able to build a low-level bomb that could blow up Paris? Why wouldn't the European countries support us?
Well, I think in part for the same reason the Gulf states wanted just stability and no issues, and they want to just keep kicking the can down the road. Yeah, I know there are issues
right there.
Look, every administration in the U.S. has kicked this can down the road, right? Just thinking, okay, we'll put it on somebody else's plate. And so I think there was a strong tendency in the EU and in the Gulf states to say, we get it. We don't like the Iranian regime. We don't want it. We understand there's a threat here. But, let somebody else deal with it.
Yeah, but somebody else in 4 weeks. I mean, we were talking about a very short period of time where this uranium could be melded into a bomb. See, I don't get it in the sense that, and I'm going to deal with the Pope in a few minutes. All right, so yeah, nobody likes this, and this is wrong. Nobody wants people to die, but when you have a potential where 10,000 more people would die, aren't you, morally compelled to deal with that rather than look the other way, as millions of Americans are doing, millions, and almost all of the NATO countries are doing. They just don't want to get involved.
Right, they don't want to get involved. They want somebody else to deal with it, and in this case, the U.S.
But they don't want us to deal with it. We're somebody else. They don't want us to deal with it.
Yeah, there's good reporting that said, MBS and the Saudis have been pushing the White House to continue the fight, right? Let's get rid of this regime.
Very few, though, and that's an economic-based thing. Last question for you. So, looking ahead, President Trump's got to worry about midterm elections, or he loses an enormous amount of power if the Democrats take control of Congress. And how big a factor is that going to be? And again, the Iranians know that in his trying to at least come to some conclusion here.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The Iranians look, particularly the political side of that, right? You've got the politicians, you've got the theocracy, you've got the mullahs, and you've got the military, the IRGC primarily. Frankly, the IRGC has cemented their position as the top dog within Iran at this point. But those elements are sophisticated enough to have read the tea leaves here. They understand that politics drive everything in Washington. So you're absolutely right, which is why when that gas price rises and you're spending over $100 to fill up your truck, right, or people start hearing this boots on the ground concept, which immediately leads people to think, oh, we're talking long-term occupation. There's a potential for the Republicans to have their butts handed to them in the midterm election. The White House knows that. And so I think that's why we're seeing these mixed messages about, well, we got these negotiations going on. We're having some productive talks. But if they don't work, we're going to obliterate the infrastructure. I think that's why you're seeing the White House work hard to try to get this message out that they are having discussions, because they're trying to keep that narrative top of mind that this is not going to be a long-term conflict.
I don't know if the Iranians are going to do it. I wish they did. Mr. Baker, thanks very much. We appreciate it.